The ex-fiancé laughed, leaning over the polished oak table as his pen scratched against the contract. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged auction room, bouncing off the dusty chandeliers and the faded wallpaper that had seen better decades. Townsfolk whispered behind folding chairs, eyes flicking between him and her. She stayed at the back, hands clenched around the strap of her bag, feeling every smirk, every careless gesture as if they were knives. "You really think that piece of land will make a difference?" she said under her breath to the woman next to her. The woman shrugged, eyes wide, fingers nervously fidgeting with her shawl. "He always thinks he's untouchable," she murmured. "Always has." "Untouchable," she repeated quietly, tasting the word like ash. Her gaze drifted to the cowboy leaning in the doorway, half hidden by the shadow of the old curtain. He wasn't smiling, wasn't laughing. He just watched. The angle of his shoulders, the set of his jaw, spoke louder than any boast. She blinked. He'd changed, stronger, taller. The quiet weight of him filled the room without a single word. Her ex-fiancé signed the papers, glanced up, and caught her staring. "Well, look who came to watch," he said, voice smooth but cold, still wearing that same look of disappointment. His smirk was casual, but the edge underneath cut deeper than she expected. "Some things never change," she said, voice steady, but her stomach twisted. A banker shifted beside him, pushing glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Everything's in order here. Sign, and it's yours," he said, pointing to the contract. The ex-fiancé grinned, dipping his pen again, the ink bleeding onto the page like a small confession. "You know," she said, moving a step forward, though her hands remained tight around the bag. "I never thought you'd really go through with it, selling off the farm like it's just another toy." He looked up slowly, as if noticing her for the first time, and his grin widened. "I play with bigger toys now," he said. "You'll understand, one day." His eyes lingered on her, sharp and cold, and she forced herself to look away, catching the cowboy's eyes for a brief second. He didn't flinch, didn't look amused, just quiet, strong, watching. A gavel slammed somewhere in the room, echoing across the hardwood floors. The auctioneer's voice shouted numbers, rising and falling in rhythm with the tension. She felt a hand on her shoulder. Her friend, the woman beside her, whispered, "You should leave. You don't need to watch him parade his wealth." She shook her head, refusing. "No," she said, "I need to see this." Every second, the ex-fiancé stood, stretching, brushing invisible dust from his sleeves. "I suppose you're curious about what's next," he said. He didn't wait for an answer. "Curiosity killed more than cats in this town," he added, and the corners of his mouth twitched with satisfaction. She clenched her teeth, trying not to answer, trying not to let the words settle too deeply. From the doorway, the cowboy stepped slightly forward, boots scraping lightly against the wooden floor. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The way he carried himself drew attention, even in his silence. The air seemed to shift. People leaned back in their chairs, sensing something unspoken. Her heart skipped. She remembered dismissing him once, laughing when he suggested they could rise above the town's petty politics. Foolish. She had been foolish. "Did you think you'd get here, and it'd feel the same?" the ex-fiancé asked, now walking toward her. "Same girl, same dreams." His voice was lower, dangerous, tasting of mockery. She looked past him, at the cowboy leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. No expression, no indulgence, just power in its quietest form. "Things change," she said finally, voice steady. "And so do people." He laughed again, that easy, practiced laugh that always made her stomach turn. "Do they? Or do they just hide better?" He gestured vaguely at the signed papers, at the stacks of contracts lining the table. "Power changes everything, even your memory of what mattered." She swallowed hard, feeling a surge of anger and regret, both at herself and at the man she once thought she wanted. "Power isn't everything," she said. "Some things don't need your approval to mean something." She tried to meet his gaze, but his eyes were sharp, unyielding. They darted past her, caught the shadow at the doorway, and hesitated for the briefest moment. Then he shrugged, turning back to the bankers, to the papers, to the pretense of civility. The cowboy's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. He didn't move, didn't smile, didn't mock. There was no warmth, no pity, only an observation so quiet, it felt like gravity. She wanted to speak, to run, to laugh, to cry, all at once. "Why do you even stay?" her friend whispered behind her, watching him. She shook her head, not trusting her own voice. The ex-fiancé waved at the auctioneer. "Let's wrap this up. I have other matters." Papers shuffled, pen scratched, chairs scraped, and in that brief rhythm, the cowboy stepped forward, closer to the doorway, then paused. Just close enough that she noticed, just enough to make her question everything she thought she knew. She remembered the nights he'd spoken quietly, the nights she had laughed off his warnings, the nights she had ignored him entirely. All those memories flickered like candlelight across the room, weak but persistent. He had been silent then, and he was silent now. But the weight of him was different. It wasn't the absence of words that mattered. It was the presence of something stronger, something unyielding, something that could not be ignored. Her ex-fiancé glanced at her again. "Still staring," he said, voice sharp, accusing. She didn't answer, eyes fixed on the cowboy. He caught her gaze for a split second and gave a small nod. Not a greeting, not an invitation, a recognition, enough to burn into her mind. The auction ended abruptly. Papers were signed, hands shaken, the ex-fiancé's laughter trailing behind him as he exited. Whispers filled the emptying room, but she didn't hear them. She only felt the pull of the doorway, the shadow, the cowboy who had grown into a force she had never imagined. She took a step forward, but the crowd moved faster, and he disappeared, swallowed by the sunlight streaming through the half-open doors. She remained frozen, the smell of dust, ink, and polished wood filling her senses. The gavel lay forgotten on the table. The dusty lamp in the corner cast a weak yellow glow, flickering, as if signaling the first faint stirrings of change. Everything in the room seemed smaller, lesser, except the image of him, quiet, strong, powerful, without needing to shout. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands unclenched. The sting of rejection lingered, bitter and real, but beneath it, curiosity, awareness, and an unfamiliar pulse of respect for the cowboy she had once dismissed. And for the first time in years, she realized she had been looking in the wrong direction all along. The room emptied, voices fading. She stayed behind for a moment, staring at the empty doorway, the space he had occupied. Silence settled like dust around her. She whispered to herself, almost as a confession, "He's changed, and I." She stopped, swallowing hard, realizing she didn't yet know what she felt. Anger, regret, hope, desire, all tangled. But she knew one thing, she would find him again. The wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, the smell of hay and horse sweat filling her lungs. Horses neighed, shifting in their stalls, hooves clattering against worn boards. Sunlight streamed through narrow windows, dust motes floating lazily in the air. She took a careful step forward, eyes sweeping the stables. A stable hand, young, thin-armed, leaned against a post, cleaning a leather saddle with slow, deliberate strokes. "He's changed the place," he said without looking up. "Never thought he'd do it quietly." "Quietly?" she asked, stepping closer, trying to keep her voice steady. "You mean he's building something bigger than the town knows?" The stable hand shrugged, tossing a leather strap onto a hook. "That's what they say. Nobody talks too loud about it, though. Makes people nervous." "Why?" she pressed. "Because he's dangerous." He glanced at her, eyebrows lifted. "Not dangerous in the way you think. Dangerous 'cause he knows how things work, pays attention. Folks notice, they follow. That's it? A horse snorted, and she jumped slightly. One of the older townsfolk shuffled past, hat in hand, muttering to the young stablehand, "Quiet, now. Let him do his work. That's all anyone can do." She stopped, heart tightening. That was the cowboy she'd ignored once, years ago, while laughing at his quiet warnings. She remembered the evening he had offered to help her with repairs to the old barn, his hands steady, eyes serious. She had laughed, brushed him off, claiming she had it under control. Foolish, embarrassingly foolish. She had never seen the weight of what he could become. Now she did. "People still talk," she said softly, "even if they don't say it out loud." The stable hand nodded. "Sure, but they also don't stop. He's got plans. Moves slow, but steady. Makes them look reckless." "Plans for what?" Her voice barely carried over the neighing of a nearby mare. The old townsfolk shook his head. "Land, influence, respect. He wants them all, but he don't need to shout it. That's what scares people." She moved further into the shadows of the stable, brushing her fingers along the cold wood of the stall walls. A memory flickered her laughter, mocking him as he explained the rules of town dealings. The way she ignored his warnings about certain families, certain debts. She had been careless, blind to more than just his worth. Guilt rose like smoke in her chest, thick and heavy. "You know him?" the stable hand asked. "Once," she admitted. "I didn't take him seriously. Lots of folks didn't," he said. "Now they do." He looked at her sharply. "But you'll see for yourself soon enough, I reckon." A horse moved behind her, nudging the leather bag she carried. She jumped back. "Easy," she whispered, smoothing the animal's neck. Its eyes were dark, calm, aware. She noticed the sheen on its coat, the curve of its muscles beneath the dim light. Freedom, strength, quiet power. He had always reminded her of this, and now she felt it in the animals he tended. "Don't touch the saddles yet," the old man called from across the aisle. "They're hers, not yours." "The horses aren't his, are they?" she asked, gesturing toward the neat rows of stalls. "They are, and they aren't," the young stable hand said. "He keeps them, but they belong to the land, too. His way of showing who's got the quiet power. He doesn't need to claim it loud. The horses do that for him." She nodded slowly, taking in the shadows stretching across the stable as the sun dipped lower. Leather gleamed in the light, the smell of hay and earth grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. Every corner, every stall, whispered of discipline and control. And then she saw him, across the far end, bending over a horse, hands sure, movements slow, but precise. He hadn't seen her yet. The cowboy straightened slightly, and her breath caught. He looked the same, yet different. Taller, broader, the quiet strength of a man who had been patient while the world doubted him. He noticed her then, just briefly, eyes locking with hers. No smile, no gesture, just acknowledgement. She felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in years. Respect, fear, desire, all tangled and sharp. The old townsfolk coughed behind her. "Don't stare too long," he said, voice raspy, warning, careful. "Best to learn to watch quietly, else it'll swallow you whole." "I'm not," she began, then faltered. She didn't know what to say. Words felt useless, too small. The cowboy's presence filled the stable like the slow approach of a storm, silent but undeniable. "Quiet now," the stable hand whispered, adjusting a saddle. "He doesn't like chatter while he works. That's part of what makes him different." She nodded, swallowing hard, heart racing. The memory of ignoring him, laughing at him, rejecting him, came back fully. She had brushed off not just his help but the warning in his eyes, the strength he carried even in silence. Every laugh, every scoff, every casual dismissal felt heavier now, laden with regret. From her position, she could see the shadows on the floor stretch and twist. bending around him like the world itself knew he mattered more than anyone realized. He was quiet, controlled, focused on the horse, but aware. Every small movement was deliberate, measured, careful. She realized for the first time that power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited, gathering, silent, until the world was ready or unready to see it. "You've got to be careful," the old man muttered behind her. "He's not the kind to be underestimated, not by a long shot." "I know," she said softly. The words felt like confession. The shadows of her own mistakes, the echoes of her laughter, the weight of her ignorance, they pressed down on her chest. And yet, there was something comforting in the order here, in the quiet strength of this place. She realized that this was what she had missed before. Strength without show, respect without demand, power without arrogance. The cowboy finished adjusting the horse's saddle, running his hands over the leather. He didn't speak. He glanced up, eyes meeting hers one more time. No greeting, no invitation, just recognition. It was enough. She could feel it in her bones, the pull of someone who had grown quietly, deliberately, unstoppable in ways she had refused to see. She stepped back into the shadows, watching him work. The sound of hooves, leather, and quiet movements filled the stable. She breathed slowly, taking it all in, realizing the town would never look the same again, and neither would she. Her fingers traced the faded ink on the yellowed letter, the paper brittle, corners curled from years of neglect. The handwriting was familiar, his handwriting, but the words were from a time she had refused to read, refused to understand. "You always thought I'd fail, didn't you?" she whispered to herself, voice trembling despite her attempt at calm. Dust drifted in the afternoon light through the half-open window, settling on the papers and the family crest mounted crookedly on the wall. Photographs leaned against the mantel, edges frayed, faces frozen in smiles that felt hollow now. Her friend, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that rarely softened, stepped closer. "You found that?" she said, glancing at the envelope. "Didn't think you'd ever look here again." "I didn't mean to," she said, shaking her head, tracing the crest carved into the letterhead. "It just caught my eye." She folded it back carefully, like touching memory itself. All those warnings, all those nights he tried to tell me something, and I laughed. I ignored him, and he was right about everything. Her friend frowned, arms crossed. It wasn't just about him. Look at this town. Power doesn't sit still here. People move. Deals are made. Favors traded. You think he's the only one who saw it coming?" She shook her head. "No. But he handled it differently. Quietly. Methodically. And I didn't see it. I laughed while he built what matters." "Funny," her friend said, stepping closer, voice low. "Most folks still think the cowboy's just a local man. But you're starting to see why whispers follow him, aren't you?" She nodded slowly. "I see it. Land deals. Small victories. People bending before they even speak. He doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to." Her words caught as a memory flashed behind her eyes. Her ignoring him on the porch of her father's old house, laughing at his warnings, chasing after someone flashy instead. Her chest tightened. Guilt gnawed at her, sharp and unyielding. "You've got that look," her friend said, leaning back. "The one where your pride meets regret, and neither wins. Don't tell me you're falling into the trap of admiration again. He's changed. He's more than you remember." "I know," she said, turning back to the letter. "And I'm not sure if it's admiration. Maybe respect. Or maybe fear." Her friend let out a soft laugh. "You've always had a way with honesty, even when it hurts." The room felt smaller suddenly, weighed down with echoes of the past. She glanced at the photographs stacked against the mantel. Her father, stoic. Her mother, silent. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years. "It's all here," she murmured. "Family secrets, old grudges, mistakes I can't undo." Her friend leaned on the mantel, voice dropping. The town remembers everything. Land disputes, favors unpaid, alliances broken, and she paused, searching for the right word. He knows how to work it, quietly, slowly. Every small thing becomes part of his strength. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that truth pressing against her chest. I remember thinking he was too quiet, too slow, too safe. I wanted someone flashy, someone loud. I wanted to be noticed, not challenged. You wanted to be safe, her friend said bluntly. Safe from realizing how much power matters. Safe from seeing who could really move the town without anyone noticing. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the edges of the envelope again. The words inside spoke of diligence, patience, subtle victories she had ignored in favor of immediate attention. She imagined him, quietly negotiating with neighbors, helping elders, making deals that built influence without spectacle. The realization burned through her. "You're going to see him again?" her friend said suddenly, voice firm. "You can't pretend you won't. You've already felt it." That pull. Her heart skipped. Maybe. But what would I even say? That I ignored him? That I was blind? "Say what you feel," her friend said. "Or don't. Just go, watch, learn. You're not the same girl who laughed at him. You never will be." She looked toward the window. The fading sunlight, casting long shadows across the room, highlighting the dust and the decay. Shadows fell across the leather-bound books, across the faded carpet, across the letters stacked neatly in the corner. Each shadow seemed to echo the mistakes she'd made, the moments she'd dismissed, the opportunities she'd let slip through her fingers. "You think he remembers?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Her friend smiled faintly. "He's quiet, yes, but nothing is ever lost. He remembers everything, and he notices when someone else starts to." She closed the envelope slowly, careful not to tear it. She set it back on the old table beside the family crest, letting the weight of the past settle around her. "He's not the same man I knew," she said, almost to herself. "And I'm not the same girl. Not anymore." "Good," her friend said, patting her shoulder. "That means you can finally see clearly. That means you can choose to step into what's real, not just what you wanted to see." She nodded, taking a deep breath. The town outside seemed to hum with quiet anticipation, whispers of old deals, old grudges, the kind of tension that only years of history could produce. She imagined the cowboy moving through it all, unnoticed, patient, waiting for the right moment to reveal what he had built. Every small victory, every quiet conquest, each subtle act of influence was now visible to her, and the weight of it made her pulse quicken. "I'll go," she said finally. "I'll see him. I need to know for myself. I can't keep pretending I don't care." Her friend's eyes softened. "Then go. But remember, don't rush it. Watch, listen. Let him show you what he's become. You've waited long enough to understand what matters." She straightened, looking around the room one last time. Fading photographs, crests, letters. They all seemed to speak of memory, of time passing, of lessons learned too late. But she wasn't afraid anymore. The pull toward him, toward the quiet strength she had dismissed before, was undeniable. And with that, she stepped out of the house. The letter tucked safely in her bag, the shadows of old wounds still behind her, but no longer able to hold her back. She would see him. She would witness his power, his patience, his influence, and she would not turn away again. The past had shaped her. The whispers of the town had warned her. And now, she was ready. She slammed her hand on the stall counter. Dust rising in the sunlight, mingling with the scent of apples and dried herbs. "I told you, that's mine," she snapped, eyes narrowing at the merchant who had the audacity to shake his head. "You can't just grab it, and I didn't grab nothing," the merchant shot back, voice rough. It rolled off the wagon. "You should watch your goods better." "I did," she barked, stepping closer. letting her anger sharpen her words. Coins jingled in his apron pocket, the subtle sound of power, trade, and control. She wanted to snatch them, shove them back, but the crowd around them pressed in, murmuring quietly, watching the tension like a slow-burning fire. A shadow fell over her shoulder. She turned sharply. There he was, the cowboy, standing casually by another stall, sun catching the brim of his hat, dust motes circling him like they belonged. No smile, no greeting, just presence. Her chest tightened. "Not now," she muttered under her breath, keeping her eyes on the merchant. "Maybe you should take a step back," the merchant said, wiping his hands on a rag, voice lower now. "Don't make a scene." "I'm not backing down," she said, teeth clenched. "You know that. You've always known that." The cowboy finally spoke, calm, deliberate. "Seems like you never change," he said, voice quiet, but carrying across the small market space. The words cut through the murmur of the crowd like a knife. She froze for a moment, caught between fury and surprise. She turned toward him, eyes wide. "And you? You just stand there, watching." "Watching safer than jumping in," he said. His gaze didn't waver. "Some things aren't yours to fix." Her fingers twitched, wanting to throw coins at the merchant, wanting to grab the item she'd claimed, but the weight of his eyes held her still. "You think that's funny?" she demanded, voice tight. "No," he said simply. "I think you've got more fire than most." The merchant muttered something under his breath and shuffled away, leaving the stall empty, the coins scattered like tiny accusations across the rough wood. She bent down, scooping them up. "Thanks," she said, not looking at him, trying to keep her pride intact. "You shouldn't have," he said quietly. "Let them stay. Let people see the cost of their mistakes." She looked up, caught in the sunlight that fell through the gaps between stalls, illuminating the dust in the air. "Cost?" she asked. "You're talking like it's all a lesson." "Some things are," he said. "Some people forget. Some people need reminders." The crowd had begun to thin, but a few townsfolk lingered, whispering behind hands. Eyes darted toward her, toward him, noting the tension, the unspoken history. She felt the weight of their gaze, the power in silence, the unbroken rules of a town that measured respect and fear carefully. "You've changed," she said finally, voice low, almost a whisper. "I didn't." She stopped, realizing she was about to admit more than she intended. Pride flared, mixing with curiosity. "I didn't think you'd think I'd be here," he asked, cutting her off. "I've always been here, just quieter, waiting for things to matter more than your attention." Her pulse quickened. "And now?" "Now I just move," he said, voice blunt. "I'll let the world catch up if it can." She glanced at the scattered coins, the empty stall, the sunlight cutting across her skin. "You always knew how to do this," she said softly. "Even back then, quiet, unnoticed, but unstoppable." He shrugged lightly, eyes scanning the crowd briefly before returning to her. "Unnoticed isn't always bad. It lets you see who matters before they notice you." A merchant passing by whispered something, eyes darting toward them. "Quiet power," he said under his breath. "Can't argue with it." She blinked, realizing how much had changed, how little she had truly seen. "I laughed at you once," she admitted. "I didn't take you seriously. Thought you were small, he said, one eyebrow lifting. "I've always been exactly what I am. You just didn't notice." The words stung, but they were also a kind of truth she had ignored for years. She looked around the market, at the dust swirling in sunlight, the coins glinting, the merchants busy with their work, and realized how much she had missed in her own rush for attention and validation. "You've grown," she said, voice soft but blunt. "I see it now. Even if I didn't then." He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "And you?" he asked. "Changed much since that summer." "I try," she said, letting her hands drop to her sides. More than I can admit. Good, he said. The word was simple, but it carried weight, like a judgment and acknowledgement rolled into one. The sun shifted slightly, and shadows fell across the stalls, stretching long and deliberate, marking the passage of time, the persistence of history, the quiet gravity of power. She wanted to reach out, to ask, to say something more. But the crowd, the market, the lingering whispers of the town reminded her she wasn't alone. She was part of a social rhythm she had once ignored, and he had mastered it, every subtle movement, every quiet choice now, evident in the way the town watched him. "You're still hard to read," she said, almost smiling despite herself. Still, untouchable in a way. He glanced at her, shadows cutting across his face. "Untouchable," he said softly. "Not exactly. Just deliberate. I've learned to let things fall where they may." A gust of wind stirred the dust, curling around them, brushing against the scattered coins, the sunlit stalls, the corners of fabric and leather. She felt the pull again, the undeniable force of his presence. Curiosity, pride, past regrets, desire all collided at once. He turned, adjusting the brim of his hat, and began walking away through the market, his pace steady, unhurried. She watched him move, the sun catching his back, the dust rising in little spirals at his boots. Her chest tightened. Words caught in her throat. "You're leaving," she whispered, barely audible. He didn't answer, didn't glance back. The shadows stretched, the sunlight faded slightly, and he disappeared into the crowd. She remained frozen, stunned, feeling the quiet force of him, the lingering echo of tension, the invisible gravity of his presence. Coins jingled faintly under her hand, a reminder of transactions, power, and what had passed. She exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle. Pride, curiosity, and something she didn't yet name collided, leaving her stunned. She knew she would find him again. She had to. She held the envelope in her hands, edges frayed, the wax seal cracked but stubbornly intact. Dust clung to it as if protecting secrets that had waited years to be uncovered. She stared at the handwriting, familiar yet distant, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in far too long. The sound of distant church bells drifted through the window, slow and mournful, marking time she had already lost. "Why now?" she whispered to herself, pressing her thumb against the paper. Inside, the ink was sharp, deliberate, telling of patience, of thought, measured carefully. Her eyes moved across the lines, absorbing what she hadn't been ready to understand. He planned this all along," she said quietly. "I just didn't see it." She traced the sentences with trembling fingers, a ghost of her old self, laughing at his quiet insistence, her arrogance once believing she knew better. A knock at the door startled her. She slipped a letter into her coat pocket before her. Friend stepped in, eyes immediately catching on the slight bulge. "Found something?" the friend asked, voice low but teasing. Maybe," she said, brushing her hands over the coat. "It's one of his letters. I never opened it before." Her friend's eyebrows rose. "All this time," she nodded. "I didn't think it mattered. I thought I knew him, but I didn't even try to see." Her voice cracked slightly. "I laughed at him, ignored him, and now?" She swallowed, the weight of years pressing down. "You've always underestimated him," her friend said bluntly. "That's part of the problem. But it's not too late to understand. Open it. Learn what matters." She pulled the envelope back out, careful this time, almost reverent. Ink smeared faintly as her fingers brushed it, but the words held firm. "He was building quietly," she murmured. "Land, trust, favors, the little things that matter most. And I was too loud, too impatient to notice." Her friend leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and now, she paused, rereading a paragraph. "I have to see it. I have to see him. Not because I'm curious, not because I regret, but because I need to understand who he is. She remembered a past summer evening, sitting on the porch of her father's old property. He had leaned over the railing, serious and quiet. "You'll see," he had said, voice firm. "The town doesn't measure what matters, but I do. One day, you'll understand." She laughed then, brushing off his words. "You're slow," she had said. "Always waiting. Some of us live in the moment, you know. Some of you waste it," he replied calmly. His eyes had held patience she had scorned. She remembered the sting of pride, her laughter echoing across the boards as if the porch itself was mocking her. Now, years later, she traced the ink again. His rise, his patience, the subtle victories. She had ignored all of it lay in these letters, in handwriting she had once dismissed as ordinary. "He was stronger than I imagined," she whispered to herself. "Stronger than I gave him credit for." Her friend moved closer, peering at the lines over her shoulder. "It's not just strength," she said. "It's vision. Quiet, deliberate, untouchable, if you let him be. And you're noticing it because he's not hiding anymore." She pressed the letter to her chest. "I can't ignore him now. I see the pattern, the way he moves through the town, the deals, the trust, the respect earned, without showing off. And me. I missed it." Her mind replayed another memory, her dismissive laugh when he suggested they protect the old well from local families looking to claim it. "It's just a well," she had said. "Why care?" "It's history," he had replied. "And some things you protect quietly, so they last." She had waved him off, thinking him small, irrelevant. Yet the letters now spoke of wells preserved, lands acquired, trust built in silence, while she chased flashy gestures, empty recognition. The weight of her ignorance, the years lost, gnawed at her chest. "I've been blind," she said aloud. "Blind to patience, blind to power, blind to him." "You've been blind to a lot," her friend said gently. "But now you have a choice. Don't let it slip again. You can't change the past, but you can choose the future." She exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. Ink, envelopes, lockboxes, all symbols of things kept secret, of histories hidden, now guiding her toward understanding. The church bells tolled again, marking the hours she had lost and the hours still to come. "Do you think he'd even want to see me?" she asked quietly, voice tinged with both fear and hope. "Maybe," her friend said. "Or maybe he's been waiting for you to notice what's been right in front of you. The choice isn't his alone." Her fingers tightened around the envelope. The seal cracked, the ink smudged slightly, but indelible. Each word, each carefully formed sentence, echoed through her thoughts. She realized that their history, tangled, as it was with misunderstandings, pride, and lost time, had led to this moment. "I have to see him," she said finally, voice firm now. "I can't ignore him. Not after this. Not after seeing the strength he built quietly, the patience, the vision." Her friend nodded. "Then go. Don't wait. You know what you need." She tucked the letters carefully into her bag, a small stack of past and present, of mistakes and lessons. Every step she took felt heavier and lighter at the same time, grounded in memory, guided by understanding. The distant bells rang again, echoing through the empty streets, a signal that time could be regained if she dared to follow. She walked toward the door, resolute. Ink, envelopes, lockboxes, all reminders that the past could teach, that patience mattered, and that she could no longer ignore him. The path forward was clear now. She would find him. She had no choice otherwise. Smoke rolled across the yard, thick and acrid, curling around the charred remains of what had been her father's barn. She coughed, wiping soot from her eyes, voice raw. Someone called the fire brigade. Now, a neighbor shouted back from the other side of the fence. "It's spreading fast. Grab the hoses, everyone." Their hands shook, pulling water from the well, while shadows danced in the flickering light of the flames. She ran closer, heart hammering. Who did this? Who said it? Her voice cracked with anger and disbelief. Flames reflected in the windows of the house, throwing light across her face and the scattered tools on the ground. The cowboy stepped out from the edge of the smoke, hat low, eyes unreadable. "Step back," he said quietly. "You'll get burned if you rush in." His voice carried authority without shouting. It drew attention, bending the panic just slightly toward him. "Who are you?" she demanded, shielding her face. "Get away. This is my family's land." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed a hose, adjusting the stream, directing it with calm precision. Water hissed against flames, steam rising in clouds that cut through the smoke. "I'm helping," he said finally. "If you want it stopped, move. Stand back." Her hands trembled as she obeyed, watching him move among the fire like he knew exactly where it could jump next. She felt both gratitude and unease. The power he held was subtle but undeniable. A neighbor muttered angrily, pointing toward the burned wood. "We should have seen it coming. Fire spreads fast here. Someone's careless." "Careless," she shouted, voice sharp. "This was deliberate. You don't just forget a barn full of hay." The cowboy straightened slightly, brushing soot from his coat. "Blame doesn't help. Action does." He moved quickly, checking the edges, soaking embers before they could ignite again. Every movement measured, deliberate, confident. She watched him, chest tight. Memories of dismissing him in the past rose up the laughter, the arrogance of her own youth. Now, standing here, watching him act quietly, decisively, she realized the depth of his strength. It wasn't the flashy heroics she had once desired. It was quiet mastery, something she had ignored too long. "Did you start this?" she asked, voice tight, anger mixing with disbelief. "No," he said simply. "But I don't leave it burning if I can stop it." Smoke stung her eyes, making them water, but she refused to step back. "Why are you helping? Why care?" "Because some things are worth saving," he said, voice low, almost unreadable, even if nobody else notices. Her anger cooled slightly, replaced by the lingering heat of something she couldn't name. She felt the weight of the town's history, the grudges, the secrets that had passed from one generation to the next, and here he was intervening, quietly, without claiming any glory. Neighbors continued working, shouting instructions, passing buckets of water, beating at small flames. "Keep it down. Don't let the smoke get into the house," someone yelled. She turned back to him. "You've changed. You've become someone I should have listened to before." He glanced at her, eyes brief and steady. "You didn't? Now you see." The fire hissed and spat embers, charred wood cracking under the heat. She could smell ash, burned tools, and a lingering sense of history lost. Yet even in destruction, there was something new, forming a pattern of control, of quiet authority that he carried effortlessly. Her voice softened. "How do you always know what to do?" He adjusted the hose, spraying the small embers that had caught near the fence. "I watch, I wait, I act when it matters. You'll learn. Sooner or later, everyone does." A shadow shifted across the yard, the house. A neighbor yelled, "The fire's getting too close." He moved instantly, boots kicking dirt, hose swinging. She wanted to shout, to intervene, but the confidence in his movements forced her still. He was precise, deliberate, and in control. He extinguished sparks before they could reach timber, lifted beams with careful hands, and guided the water so nothing spread further. She realized she had been wrong to think strength needed to be loud. It could be quiet. It could be subtle. It could hold an entire town's attention without ever demanding it. She felt a mix of awe, fear, and something sharper recognition. The fire dwindled at last, smoke thinning, flames reduced to charred embers. Neighbors stepped back, breathing heavy, eyes wide with relief. She wiped soot from her cheek, hands trembling. He straightened, hat back low, gaze sweeping the yard. "It's done. Keep watch. Don't let anything flare again." She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. There was no need to thank him. Words couldn't match the quiet force of his actions. He turned toward the edge of the property, hand brushing the brim of his hat. "You'll leave like this?" she asked, unsettled, voice small. He didn't answer immediately. He mounted his horse, steady and calm, dust rising at its hooves. "Some things don't need explanation," he said finally. His voice carried across the yard, firm but quiet. Then he nudged the horse forward, and they disappeared down the lane, leaving her standing among charred wood and smoke, heart racing, unsettled in a way that would linger long after the night. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension bleed from her shoulders. Yet the image of him remained. Silent heroism, subtle authority, power she couldn't ignore. Moonlight caught the blackened beams, glinting ash in the air, and she realized she had witnessed something she had been blind to for years. She had ignored him once. She would not ignore him again. She leaned over the edge of the old well, peering into darkness. Water below rippled faintly, reflecting the dim glow of lanterns she'd carried from the house. The hollow echoes seemed to whisper of deeds long past, secrets buried, choices made in silence. "What have you done, and why?" she murmured, fingers brushing the moss-covered stones. A voice behind her startled her. "Curiosity's dangerous here." She turned to see Mr. Harris, one of the town elders, lantern in hand. His eyes, clouded with age, held warning. "The well remembers. People forget, but water keeps their echo." "I'm not here to dig up trouble," she said, voice tight. "I want to understand what happened. The fire. Everything else." Mr. Harris shook his head slowly. "Understanding doesn't come easy. People think the loudest are the strongest, but some of the quiet ones." His gaze drifted toward the darkened streets. "They move whole towns without anyone noticing." She clenched her jaw. "You mean him?" He studied her carefully. "I mean the one who acts when no one's watching. The one who makes choices others only whisper about later. You've seen hints. You'll see more if you look close. I've already seen enough to know he's different," she said. Her hands gripped the edge of the well. "Not flashy, not loud, but—" She trailed off, searching for words. "Calculated. Certain." Mr. Harris nodded. "Certain and patient. That's how power lasts." The water below rippled again, shadows twisting across its surface. She leaned closer. "You're saying the fire? It wasn't random." "Nothing here is," he said bluntly. "Every act has roots. Every spark leads somewhere." His lantern flickered in the wind, casting long shadows along the well stones. "People talk about him quietly. Don't underestimate what you hear in whispers." She swallowed. "Whispers don't carry weight if they're ignored." "Not here," he said. "They carry more than you think. Some words shape towns before anyone sees it." Her mind drifted to the cowboy, his calm movements at the fire, his silent authority. The realization pressed against her chest. He was the force behind these currents she'd ignored for so long. Her own past pride felt small and foolish in comparison. She turned toward the edge of the street where lanterns flickered, casting pools of light on cobblestones slick with smoke from the fire. "How does someone like him," she began, hesitant, "rise without anyone stopping him?" "Patience," Mr. Harris said. "Timing, quiet. People who shout get remembered, but those who watch get history." A younger townsman approached, eyes wary. "Miss, the fire." It stirred old grudges. "People are talking. You should be careful where you ask questions." "I'm aware," she said, "but I need to know. Everything. Land, disputes, favors, debts. Everything he touches." The townsman frowned. "You're walking a line. People notice. And some things you don't understand yet." "I want to understand," she said, voice firm. "I can't ignore him anymore, not after seeing what he's capable of." Mr. Harris shifted slightly, lantern light reflecting in his eyes. Then start at the well. Listen to the echoes, ask the old ones. Watch the way he moves. You'll see the patterns if you pay attention. She bent again, peering into the water. The reflection of her face wavered, mingling with shadows. Patterns, she whispered. I thought I was chasing something flashy. I see now, it's the quiet threads that hold everything together. A woman from a nearby house leaned from the porch. You're asking too much, she said bluntly. Some truths aren't for the young or the impatient. I'm neither young nor impatient, she said sharply. I've waited. I've ignored. I've learned. Now I act. The elders exchanged glances, shadows crossing their lined faces. If you follow him, Mr. Harris said, voice low, know this. He doesn't answer to noise. He answers to purpose. And only the prepared see him clearly. She straightened, lantern held high, looking down at the water again. Its surface shimmered, carrying back her own reflection, fragmented, broken by ripples. Purpose, she murmured. I understand now. I need to approach him. See him directly. Her friend, who had been quietly observing, nodded. Then don't hesitate. The longer you wait, the more you wonder if he notices your curiosity or sees it as weakness. I've waited long enough, she said, voice steady, finally meeting the reflection of her own determined gaze in the water. I won't let silence hold me back. I'll find him, and I'll face what's coming. Mr. Harris's eyes softened slightly. Courage isn't loud. It's the willingness to step into the unseen, the depth of things most ignore. That's what you'll need. Lanterns swung in the night breeze, their light bouncing across the edges of the well and the cobblestones. Shadows stretched long, carrying whispers of old grudges and unseen influence. She felt the weight of the town's memory pressing in, the well's depth reflecting not just her own face, but the hidden forces shaping her world. I understand, she said quietly, voice firm. I see it now. The quiet power, the patience, the careful watch of someone who shapes things without anyone noticing, and I won't ignore it again. Her friend placed a hand on her shoulder. Then go. Approach him, carefully. Watch, but don't hesitate when the moment comes. She nodded, lantern held high. The echoes of water, whispers of elders, flickering lights all carried her forward. The path was clear. She would confront him. She would see him directly, no longer content to chase shadows or rumors. The well remained behind her, water rippling quietly, holding echoes of past deeds and silent truths. She turned toward the road where he might appear, resolve firm. This time, she would meet him on equal ground. She swung her leg over the saddle, leather creaking beneath her weight, and heard the soft rustle of movement behind her. He waited, horse shifting, eyes steady and unreadable under the brim of his hat. The canyon walls caught the early dusk light, shadows stretching long and sharp. You came, she said, voice tight, careful. I did, he replied, voice low. You asked to see me. I don't leave unanswered calls. Her hands gripped the reins, knuckles white. I didn't ask for a ride into danger. Danger is where clarity comes, he said. And we both need clarity. His eyes flicked toward the trail ahead, then back to her. You think I wanted to show up and be polite? I thought you wouldn't come at all, she said, tone sharper than she intended. I thought you'd stay hidden behind quiet power. I've never hidden, he said. You just refused to look. She laughed bitterly, eyes on the canyon walls. Looked I ignored. I doubted. I dismissed. That's not the same as looking. Didn't stop me, he said. His horse shifted beneath him, leather glinting in the last light. I moved while you talked. She tightened her jaw, watching the shadows stretch over the rocks. So now we ride together, I suppose. Pretend none of the past mattered. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Nothing's pretending here. But we can't move forward without reckoning. The trail narrowed, rocks jutting out under the horse's hooves. Dust rose in the fading light. Reckoning, she repeated. Funny word. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said bluntly, but neither is ignoring it. Silence settled, heavy and full, punctuated only by the scrape of hooves and the wind through the canyon. She risked a glance at him. You've changed, she said quietly, voice almost lost in the canyon's echo. I told you, he said. Patience, observation, quiet strength. You're dangerous, she said, eyes narrowing. Not because you're reckless, but because you don't have to be loud for people to notice. Dangerous? He asked, voice low, amused. I'd call it necessary. Her fingers brushed the leather of her saddle. Necessary for what? Control, revenge, justice. All of it, he said simply. Some things can't be ignored. Some people can't be dismissed. You mean me, she said, heart quickening. You've been waiting for me to notice. Exactly, he said, eyes catching hers briefly before flicking back to the path. You're finally looking. The canyon narrowed further, cliffs rising sharply. Shadows deepened, folding over the horses and riders. She could feel the heat of his presence, the weight of his quiet authority, pressing against her own resistance. I should hate you, she said, voice low, but her heart betrayed her. I should resent everything you've done while I ignored you. And yet, he prompted, tone patient, teasing just slightly. And yet, she said, voice catching, I don't. She faltered, realizing how dangerous her words were. He rode closer, careful but deliberate. Don't finish it if you're not ready, but recognize it. That's all I ask. Her fingers grazed the reins again, mind spinning. You always knew, she said, about my pride, my mistakes. And still, I acted anyway, he said, because some things matter more than wounded pride. Some opportunities, once lost, don't come back. Dust swirled around them, canyon walls closing in, the path rugged. And what about desire? She asked, voice trembling slightly. Do you count that among things that matter? He let the question hang a moment, eyes dark, unreadable. Then he shrugged slightly. Desire can be complicated, but it doesn't go unnoticed. She laughed quietly, bitter and soft. Complicated. That's one word for it. The trail opened slightly, a plateau catching the last slant of sunlight. They slowed their horses, allowing space between them. Leather gloves brushed against reins and saddle, a subtle intimacy in small movements. You're a hard man to read, she said. I've made it a point, he said. Hard to read, easier to trust if you pay attention. Watch closely, notice everything. That's how you understand someone. I notice, she said, voice low. Every word, every pause. I've been blind before. Not anymore. Night settled gradually, canyon shadows deepening into black. The horses moved slowly, dust settling behind them. The only sound there, quiet breathing and hooves on rough earth. She felt tension ease slightly, replaced by an unspoken understanding, a shared awareness that words alone could not convey. They came to a small clearing as twilight fell, setting up camp near a dry creek bed. Firelight flickered across their faces, casting long shadows that danced across the rocks. Sparks rose and vanished into the night sky, mingling with the smell of wood smoke and leather. You ride well, she said quietly, sitting near the fire. Careful, deliberate. I can't decide if it's infuriating or admirable. Both, he said simply. Take your pick. I'll wait. They sat across from one another, firelight reflecting in eyes, silent words hanging in the space between them. No apologies, no explanations. Only the heat of the fire and the quiet intimacy of proximity, of shared danger and history. She studied him, leather gloves resting on knees, posture relaxed but alert. I don't understand all of it, she said softly, but I want to. He nodded slowly. Then start by paying attention. The rest follows. Night deepened, stars glinting above canyon walls. Horses grazed quietly nearby. The fire crackled, sending sparks into darkness. In that glow, she realized the tension between them was no longer only conflict. Desire, history, unspoken truths, everything converged quietly, dangerously, and beautifully. The ride had ended, but the story between them had only begun. She stepped through the heavy front door, the click of the lock echoing in the empty hall. Dust motes floated in shafts of sunlight that pierced the tall windows, settling on polished wood and leather-bound chairs. "It's quieter than I expected," she said, voice tentative, scanning the minimalist elegance around her. He followed, head in hand, eyes alert. "Silence is deliberate," he said. "Too much noise obscures what matters." She frowned, adjusting her coat. "You've built this, but no one sees it. Why?" He walked ahead, keys jingling softly at his belt. "Some things are private for a reason. Some power needs room to grow unnoticed." "Power grows unnoticed," she repeated, voice sharp. "You mean influence. Secrets. Deals behind doors everyone forgets exist." "Call it what you want," he said, opening a door that revealed a narrow staircase leading down. "I call it survival. And preparation." She followed him carefully. "Preparation for what?" "Life," he said simply, "and the moments when you need to act without hesitation." The stairs creaked under her boots. The basement smelled faintly of old wood and ink. Shelves lined the walls, stacks of ledgers and letters tied neatly in bundles. "All this," she said, gesturing, "you've been keeping it hidden. What are you planning?" "Not planning," he corrected, flipping open a ledger with careful fingers. "Recording. Remembering. Not everyone values memory. But I do." She leaned closer, eyes scanning the numbers and names, realizing these weren't just accounts. They were history. Alliances, debts, favors given and collected. "You've handled all this alone." He shrugged, eyes not leaving the page. "Alone enough to matter. Others try to take credit, fail to notice. That's how influence lasts." She lifted a small bundle of letters, dust puffing up. "And these? Weren't they meant to be read by someone else?" "Some truths are meant for understanding later," he said. "Not everyone can handle them in the moment. Timing is everything." She frowned, reading a note that hinted at land deals. "Charity quietly extended, settlements prevented. You've been helping, controlling, protecting." "Sometimes," he said, eyes lifting to hers. "Sometimes watching, sometimes intervening quietly. Most people never know what kept them safe until it's too late." Her hands shook slightly. "I underestimated you," she admitted. "I thought your silence meant weakness." He smiled faintly, corners of his mouth twitching. "Silence is not weakness. It's patience, observation, understanding. You'll learn that soon enough." They walked further down the hall, keys jingling as he unlocked another door. Sunlight streamed across the floor, illuminating dust particles like tiny stars. "Every locked door has a reason," he said. "Every choice has consequences unseen." She touched a polished desk, tracing its edge. "And you've managed all of it. Every deal, every favor, every silent act of—" "What?" "Protection. Control, if you prefer the word," he said. "Some things are fragile. Fragile things need attention without display. Otherwise, they break." She glanced at family portraits tucked into corners. Some faded, some vibrant, all meticulously preserved. "Your family," she said softly. "Your sacrifices." "Not sacrifices," he said quietly. "Choices. Some painful, some necessary. We live with them and move forward. Some history must be carried silently." She realized the weight he carried every quiet action, every unspoken decision. Her own judgments, her previous assumptions about him, felt small, almost foolish. "You've built more than I imagined," she said, voice tight. "More than just influence. More than wealth. You've built authority. Authority, he echoed, voice steady. Power is recognition without display. Wealth is just the tools. Influence is what you do with them. That's the difference. She studied the room, the sunlight catching dust motes, the keys, the heirlooms carefully placed, and you've done all of it quietly. Everyone thinks it's luck, or chance, or clever timing, but it's deliberate, intentional. Exactly, he said. Every move intentional, every step calculated. People see the surface, never the foundation. She swallowed, stepping closer. And all this time, I dismissed you, ignored what you could do. Thought the loud, flashy people mattered more than you. He looked at her, eyes sharp. They're easy to notice, but easy isn't lasting. You've seen that now. Her heart tightened, chest heavy with a mix of awe and something she hadn't admitted, yet admiration, maybe fear, maybe desire. I see it now, she whispered. I understand why the town listens when you speak, even when no one sees you. He didn't answer immediately. He let her absorb it, allowed her to process the weight of what she had discovered. Then he said quietly, most people never notice until it's too late. You're noticing. That matters. Her eyes swept the room one last time, lingering on the locked doors, the ledgers, the dust motes in sunlight. She understood the full scope, not the hidden power, the careful accumulation, the sacrifices she hadn't known he made. Everything she had assumed about him, everything she had dismissed, was small compared to what she now faced. You're wealthier, stronger, more capable than I ever imagined, she said, voice barely above the quiet hum of the house. I misjudged everything. He nodded slightly, keys jingling as he closed a door behind them. Judgments are easy. Understanding takes attention. Now you see clearly. She felt both unsettled and drawn to the weight he carried. The quiet authority he commanded without ever demanding it. Sunlight glinted off a family crest embedded in the wall, dust swirling in its glow. She realized her perception of him had shifted entirely. She had underestimated him. Not now. Not ever again. The door slammed open, rattling the tavern's wooden beams. Dust rose in lazy clouds as chatter died abruptly. She looked up from the table where she sat across from him, the cowboy's calm presence, a stark contrast to the sudden storm. He stood at the threshold, hands gripping the doorframe, chest tight in his tailored jacket, eyes sharp under the brim of his hat. Well, this is unexpected, he said, voice low. She froze for a moment, heart hammering. You shouldn't be here, she said, voice steady, despite the tension. I should. His laugh was clipped, almost bitter. I see her, and suddenly I'm the interloper. That's rich. I'm not who I was, she said, leaning back slightly, eyes narrowing. And you've clearly noticed that. Noticed? I see it, he said, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. You've changed. Or maybe you're just pretending better. I'm not pretending anything, she said sharply. You're just late to the realization party. He stepped closer, eyes glinting with old familiarity. Late? You think you can build walls around yourself and expect the world to forget who you were to me. She straightened, fingers brushing the rim of her glass. No one forgot. I just stopped caring what you thought mattered. The cowboy didn't move, but his eyes met hers with a calm, assessing gaze. Careful, he murmured. Some people in this room might notice how you act under pressure. Let them notice, she said, voice firm. I've spent too long listening to people like him. Her gaze shifted to her ex, noting the tight jaw, the polished glasses, the badge on his coat, symbols of authority and pride he still relied upon. You see him now? But I see you. And the difference? She let her hand drift lightly over the table, feeling the rough wood under her palm. Is everything? Everything, the ex said, voice rising, a vein of irritation showing through practiced composure. You think some cowboy can impress you while I've been building? Impressing? She cut him off, voice hard. I'm not impressed by bluster, status, or mirrors you've polished for vanity. I'm not impressed by anyone who waits for people to follow, instead of leading with action. He blinked, momentarily thrown, eyes darting between her and the cowboy. You've changed your tune, he said, tone clipped, defensive. You were always quick to admire the wrong things. I admire courage, consistency, and quiet strength, she said, voice unwavering. All things you've never understood. The cowboy shifted slightly. Horse-like calm, subtle power radiating from his stillness. He didn't speak, letting her words land. The ex's stance stiffened. A man used to unquestioned dominance, suddenly unsure. I thought I could dictate terms, he said, voice lower, more calculated. I thought you thought wrong, she said, leaning forward now, eyes blazing. You're late. You're here to reclaim what's already gone. I've moved. I see things clearly now. Your threats, your status, your authority, they mean nothing to me. He adjusted his glasses, smearing a faint fingerprint across the lens. You can't, I can, she said, voice low but fierce. I've learned to see people for who they are, not what they want me to believe they are. That includes you. The tavern had gone silent. Waitstaff paused mid-step, patrons frozen in uncertain curiosity. She felt no fear, only clarity, only power in understanding the shifting dynamics and knowing where she now stood. You've chosen him, the ex finally said, voice tight, a mixture of disbelief and resentment. I've chosen clarity, she said. I've chosen action. I've chosen someone who acts, not someone who demands. And that leaves no space for you in my life. His jaw tightened. You'll regret you already are, she said, cutting him off, tone like steel. You already regret every moment you underestimated people who moved quietly, patiently, deliberately. You just didn't see it coming until it was too late. The cowboy's eyes met hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, unspoken but heavy with understanding. She felt the gravity of her choice, the finality of her shift in allegiance. It was not just loyalty. It was recognition of the person who had earned her respect through action, not entitlement. Her ex's fists clenched. He adjusted the badge pinned to his chest, a flimsy symbol now dwarfed by the quiet authority in the room. You think you can just? I know I can, she said, voice rising just enough to command attention. Because I've seen who truly carries weight, who shapes things without noise, who's present even when unnoticed. And you, sir, are not that person. He stared at her, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he turned abruptly, boots thudding against the wooden floor as he strode toward the door. This isn't over, he muttered, but there was a hesitation now, a crack in his certainty. She didn't flinch. She didn't call him back. She let him leave, the door slamming behind him with a finality she savored. The tavern remained quiet, the tension hanging thick, then slowly easing as people returned to their tasks. Sensing the shift in power, she looked at the cowboy, who leaned back slightly, eyes still assessing, unspoken words lingering. He won't try again, she said softly, still catching her breath from the confrontation. He might, he said, calm, voice low, but it won't matter. You've already decided, and that matters more than any badge, any mirror, any threat he can throw. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the table, the glass she'd touched before now cool beneath her fingers. I know, she said, voice steady. I see clearly now. And I won't be swayed by anyone else's ego or history. He nodded once, just slightly, the candlelight flickering across his face. Silence settled around them, heavy and complete, yet filled with understanding. The ex had returned, tried to assert dominance, but she had moved beyond the past, beyond old attachments, into clarity and alignment with someone who had proven their power quietly, deliberately, and with integrity. For the first time, She felt whole, unshaken. Mirrors, badges, glasses, symbols of vanity and authority no longer held sway over her perception. She had chosen, and her choice was final. The shovel struck the dry earth with a hollow thud. She cursed under her breath, the wind carrying the sound toward the old oak at the edge of the family plot. Her hands were blackened with soil, fingernails caked, but she didn't stop. The faded flowers beside the weathered markers stirred in the gust, petals trembling. "Damn stubborn ground," she muttered, kicking at a clump. "You don't have to do it all alone," he said quietly from the edge of the grave. Hat tipped back, eyes on her. His boots pressed against the dirt, steady, calm. "I do," she said, voice tight. "This is mine. I have to do this myself. Always have." He nodded once. "I understand. I'm not here to fix what's gone. I'm here to stand." She wiped her hands on her coat, leaving streaks of brown across the fabric, and glanced at him. "Stand?" she asked, sharp. "You make it sound easy. Standing doesn't fill the void, doesn't fix the silence." "No," he said bluntly. "It doesn't. But it shows the world who you are, and who you choose to trust." She kicked the shovel again, loosening the earth. "Trust, that's heavy. Especially when the people who should have held you are gone, or wrong." "You're not wrong," he said softly, eyes following her movements. "You've survived. You've learned. That counts for more than anything they left behind." She looked down at the half-dug grave, at the sun beginning to peek behind the hills, casting long shadows across the plot. "I never thought it would matter. This ground, these names, until now." He stepped closer, hand brushing lightly against the handle of the shovel. "It matters. To remember, to vow, to act. I act," she said, voice bitter with past failures. "I've acted poorly before, ignored, dismissed. Let the world's noise drown out what should have been clear. Then act differently now," he said, blunt, unyielding. "Don't let the past dictate the strength you carry today." Her hands rested on the edge of the grave, pressing against the soil, feeling its weight. "Strength. I don't always feel it," she admitted, low. "Sometimes just fatigue. Sometimes fear." "Fear is part of it," he said. "Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive, but it doesn't define you." "You do?" she swallowed, voice cracking slightly. "I don't want to just survive. I want something more. Integrity, respect, action, not empty words." "You'll get it," he said. "I don't offer false promises. Only presence. Only truth." Her hands trembled as she straightened, brushing soil from her sleeves. Presence, truth. Words sound simple, but they carry weight when said by someone who's lived them. He met her gaze, eyes unwavering. "I've lived them. I won't lie. I won't pretend." "That's the promise. You can measure it or doubt it, but it won't change." A gust of wind swept through the markers, rattling faded letters on stone. She shivered, pulling her coat tighter. "Promises. I've made them, broken them. Others have broken them to me. I've learned to hesitate before trusting." "Good," he said, blunt and steady. "Hesitation keeps you alive, but don't let it keep you from seeing what's real when it's in front of you." She exhaled slowly, leaning down to grip the shovel again. The sun crept higher, glinting off the edge of the weathered markers, illuminating soil particles swirling in the air. "I vow," she began, voice low, almost reverent, "to honor them, to honor myself, to live without shame and without fear, to act, not wait, to see what matters, and keep it." He stood behind her, silent support, allowing her words to fill the graveyard. "And I vow to stand by what's right. Quietly, always. You'll know it when it matters." She glanced over her shoulder, meeting his eyes. "I believe you," she said, blunt, no hesitation. "For the first time, I trust what I see, not what I hope for." "You should," he said simply. "Trust is earned, not given. You've earned it. You've proven you can handle the weight of your choices. Her fingers dug into the earth, pressing firmly as she straightened once more. The world isn't kind. It won't wait for me. And I won't wait for it either. Exactly, he said. That's why we act. Not just for ourselves. For what we respect. For what matters. The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of wildflowers from the hillside beyond. She paused, hand on a weathered marker, tracing carved letters with her thumb. I never thought I'd feel this. Standing here, alive, knowing I'd choose my path. Not following, not begging, choosing. You're choosing, he said, voice low, quiet authority in every word. That's the only way forward. Decisions made in clarity, not fear. That's the oath. That's the promise. She turned fully to him, sunlight glinting off her eyes, revealing resolve, hardened by past mistakes, but softened by understanding. I vow, she said again, voice stronger now, to live honestly, fiercely, to respect strength and integrity when I see it, to act, not wait, and to honor those who've fallen by carrying their memory forward. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. And I'll stand, not in front, not behind, beside, always beside, when you need it. She looked to the horizon, the sun rising fully now, casting golden light across the markers, the soil, the trees swaying in the gentle breeze. A sense of beginning stirred, fragile, but undeniable. She exhaled, letting the air fill her lungs. The weight of grief lifted slightly, replaced with purpose, clarity, and the quiet acknowledgement that she would no longer follow the paths set by others' failures. The cowboy stepped back, tipping his hat slightly. She dropped the shovel into the dirt, hands resting lightly on the rim of the grave. Together, they stood in silence, wind rustling the leaves. Soil settled around her fingers, sunlight warming the cold markers. For the first time, she felt both the gravity of loss and the promise of what lay ahead. New beginnings, deliberate choices, and unwavering respect for the one who had proven his integrity quietly, without fanfare, without demand. The past remained, but she stood forward, ready to act, as the dust settled and the sun rose over the town. She stood tall, eyes fixed on the cowboy, who had quietly changed everything. Her past, her ex, her doubts, her regrets lay behind her. He turned, nodding once, a silent promise of what was to come. She smiled, not with triumph, but with knowing. This time, she chose strength. This time, she chose him. And in that choice, her world finally shifted,